Thank you so much for joining us for today's session. I'm Amy Orlov. I'm the Director of Professional Programs at Forte, and happy Tuesday, everyone. I'm excited to introduce today's Changemaker session on holiday spirits. Get it? Holiday spirits. As Forte celebrated its 20th anniversary this year, we were thinking about all the people, the ideas, and the initiatives that really worked with us to transform the business and business school landscape. So, not sure if you heard, but our partner schools are at 42% women at this point. Really exciting. But we decided that we really wanted to showcase those change makers. Once again, the people, the ideas, and the initiatives that are really impacting the business landscape as we know it in our newest speaking series. And here we are. Not sure about our audience, but I know that when I think about alcohol and the industry itself, I don't necessarily think of more women leading, but I think that's going to change for everybody after today's session. When we had this idea for the session, I thought, well, who better to have as a moderator, someone who I consider one of the original allies for gender equity, Daniel Ingram. Forte got to know Daniel when he was an MBA student at Wharton, and he was, I'm not sure, Daniel, if you were a founder of the Men as Allies Club, but I know you'll talk about that story a little bit, but and of course works in the alcohol industry. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Daniel. But before I do, I forgot, I just got a note from our tech host. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A because we will be taking questions at the end of the session. If you have a chat or just a comment, put it in the chat. But if there's a direct question, please put it in the Q&A. Okay, now I'm going to hand it over to you, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks so much, Amy. Thanks for the introduction. Just a little bit about myself, and then I'm very eager to hand it over to our panelists. So as Amy mentioned, I'm Daniel Ingram. I graduated from Wharton in 2016, where I had a sort of the humbling privilege of being part of our male allyship organization called the Wharton 22s. The Wharton 22s was founded as part of Wharton Women in Business to really bring men into the conversation on topics that are typically they typically shy away from. And we knew that for these topics to really make an impact, not only in the student community, but also in the companies that students would then go be a part of, we need to bring everyone into the conversation to really prioritize advancing the business leadership and equity of women. So that was an amazing experience. After graduating Wharton, I joined Anheuser-Busch InBev, which is the largest beer manufacturer in the world. And today I'm part of our B2B e-commerce team leading customer experience. That's enough about me. I'm really excited to introduce our two panelists, two incredible women entrepreneurs in this space, and we'll get more into that. But we have Dee Robinson and also Rosalinda Mendoza with us. And I'll first hand it over to Dee to introduce herself, and then, of course, Rosalinda.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for this great and kind invitation. It's my joy to be here today. And I do love talking about spirit. So this is going to be a spirited conversation, as we say. But I have been in the, an entrepreneur for over 25 years, been in the food and beverage space. For most of that time, I used to be in corporate America. We all talked about the Penn connection here already. And but many of you have already been customers of mine. So I want to thank you because I own and operate restaurants and retail and airports around the country. Hudson News is one of our partnerships. Some of our brands, Frontera Grill, Ben & Jerry's, and many other things. So we thank you. But today we're going to be talking a little bit about spirits. And I moved from the food side to the beverage side by becoming a bourbon maker. So we can talk more about that. But again, thank you for having me.
No, thanks, Dee. And Rosalinda, please.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, same as Dee shared, I'm really excited to be here with all of you guys. My name is Rosalinda Mendoza. I am CEO and co-founder of Mosel Mezcal Artesanal. I co-founded it with my sister. We started about 5 years ago, but we actually launched 2 years, and we'll get into like the delay. It was something called the pandemic, but we're here. And so we make small batch artisanal mezcal from Michoacan, Mexico, which is where my family's originally from. And we are mainly in the West Coast. We just got distribution to New York, and really excited to share the story of mezcal and specifically the region of Michoacan.
No, amazing. And before we get started on some of the questions that I have for Dee and Rosalinda, we have a poll. If everyone can take a look, because this topic, but also these panelists, can touch a range of topics, right? But both Rosalinda and Dee are entrepreneurs in this space, and we'd love to hear from the audience whether you're here to sort of learn more about entrepreneurship in general. And of course, the beverage industry is full of entrepreneurs, or if you're just interested in the alcohol industry, or if you just a passionate consumer who saw the topic and said, I'd love to learn more about bourbon and mezcal and beer. So I'll give people a few moments to
While they're taking that poll, Daniel, I really want to encourage the audience to include their questions in the chat. I know I speak for Rosalinda that we are here today just to be of service and help in any way we can, and maybe spark some sort of energy towards something. But please don't hesitate. This is why we're here. It's our joy to talk about what we do, but more importantly, to help others.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Love it.
All right, good. This is great. And so this leads naturally to my first question for both Rosalinda and Dee. And what really inspired you to enter this industry in particular? I have a feeling, although you tell us, that you have the entrepreneurship bug in you, as I'm sure most of the participants do, and a lot of people that entering MBA programs have. What really inspired you to join this industry in particular? What was the calling?
Rosalinda,
we'll start with you.
All right, I'll start. No, I'll be happy to start. Well, as I mentioned, I'm a restaurateur, and I just started in, like most of the entrepreneurs, we're all kind of curious people. I also consider myself a life learner. So I actually started drinking bourbon, and I was curious enough to find out, like, what is it made? And finally, I decided I wanted to learn how to be a craft distiller. And I figured I had to take all that learning and then become one. So literally, it went from interest in the spirit and the joy of it, and and I say making bourbon is both art and science. So it appealed to me on both ends in that way. And then one thing led to the next. And so I actually put liquid in barrels in 2018. So if you think about how long a process, and Rosalind and our business are a little different because I have to put it in there and wait. And then what I will also share with you is that as a restaurateur, we talk about food as the star. The product must be good. So I actually sort of ventured out saying that it was important that we made bourbon worthy of its name. So I make Good Trouble bourbon. So there's a lot of stories about that name. And but the quick one is I had an older sister, Pearl, and but at the same time, 10 years later, twins showed up, and my mom said to us that the only kind of trouble we get in was good trouble, because my sister got into all the other. But what is also important about this name, and even the mission of the bourbon, is simply this: late 60s, during very turbulent times. Many people know John Lewis, who inspired us to get into Good Trouble. And so the bourbon really is intended to be a catalyst for change. And how do we do that, and how we use our voice? So, we are award-winning. We're so blessed beyond belief. And we'll talk about how important it is also to make great stuff, particularly as women in a very, male-dominated space, because they want to discount you anyway. But I will share that the joy has simply been that to make great bourbon, to help both men and women love this. And that's really what motivated it. And here we are today.
Yeah, Rosalinda, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dee, for sharing that. So at the time, it was interesting. So I did my MBA at the university, like all of us here at the panel, and with Forte's mission of trying to get more women into MBA programs. So I did my MBA at the University of Washington, in Seattle, in graduated in 2015. After that, I went into tech, and I was born and raised in rural Washington in this community called the Yakima Valley. And Daniel, it might click for you. So Yakima,
I've been.
yeah. So Yakima is a community that it it's known for its agricultural products. So it's a top producing region in hops. So most like if you've had beer, the hops have come from Yakima, apples, cherries. And so because of that, there's a significant Mexican immigrant community in the Yakima Valley. And that's how my family ended up there as farm workers. And so my family immigrated from Michoacan, Mexico. And Michoacan is a region with a denomination of origin for mezcal. So similar to champagne, right? You can't call it champagne
Yeah.
unless champagne brand. Same thing with mezcal. Most likely, if you've had mezcal, I'm curious, maybe we could pull how many of you guys have had mezcal. But if you've had mezcal, you probably have had mezcal from Oaxaca, which is another region that also produces mezcal. But I grew up as farm worker kids going back between Washington State and Michoacan. And one of the things, obviously, as we got older and could drink, we noticed that it was really hard to find Michoacan mezcal. And we can get into like the reasons for that. But also too, the other thing we noticed was that there wasn't a lot of people from our community telling our stories from our perspective. And I'll never forget my sister saying, well, why not us? And it's like such a very simple but powerful question, and also very scary, of like, why not us? And so this was back in 2017, 2018. And we decided, you know what? Okay, we're gonna do it. So we're part of a co-op in Michoacan that's made up of agave farmers and mezcal producers. And so we started looking into producing and importing mezcal into the US from Michoacan. And so that was really the reason why we started Moseles, because we wanted to tell the story from Michoacan. But also so much has changed in even the last 5 years, but for us, it was really important to be able to be part of the narrative and be able to help establish a mezcal culture in the US that considers the history, the land, and the way it connects people.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. What I pulled from both of these answers is that you both had a passion for the product as consumers. And I think that's, especially in the CPG space, a lot of people, myself included, like a lot of people think about entering industries that they, as consumers, are also passionate about, because then you can be a passionate leader in that industry. But I think, of course, the alcohol industry has this, like, there's a low representation of women, and, you know, we can debate why. My theory is that people view alcohol incorrectly as a men's drink, especially beer, but even liquor. And so I think for both of you, taking that passion that you have, that looking at the chat, like clearly everyone has, it took obviously bravery to try to jump into an industry that, as both of you said, is there's hurdles. As Dee said, you're already at a disadvantage because people are going to discount you, so you almost have to over deliver. I mean, what are some of the other misconceptions that you've had to disprove or have disproven already in your journey that you've seen across, you know, industry peers, with buyers, retailers, wholesalers, all these stakeholders that you have to manage? What are some of the misconceptions that you've overcome?
Well, I'll start, Rosalinda. First of all, to your point, Daniel, that many people don't believe that we should, bourbon makers, mezcal makers, anyone in the spirits look like us. And I will tell the audience that even though I have the background that I have, that I have now a multi-million-dollar company, that there's still this idea that, in fact, this was said, she's just playing around. It's a novelty for her. And, but then when people don't think you're serious, first of all, they don't necessarily respond. And here you are, and I know we have many stories that we could share about the hurdles, but, honestly, hurdles are really just things to get over. And we also have to just recognize that no one ever said it would be easy. And just so you also know, someone even tried to take the liquid that I have and work with my eighth generation master distiller, thinking that, that was not going to matter to me and that I wouldn't necessarily fight for it. So I'm here so that lets you know, number one, we fight for what is important to us and we don't allow an obstacle to stop us from realizing our own dreams, number one. At the same time, because there's that perception, and what I will share with anyone, I always say in my early career, I'll admit that there was probably that chip on my shoulder. I'm African-American female, and you're fighting that battle, but you learn to stop being upset. Don't allow them to take you off your game. And what I've learned is let them underestimate you and go do you. Then you just appear. And so I just don't focus anymore on what's negative or anything in anything I do. How do I need to move forward? How do I get around the obstacles and the roadblocks that might be there? But I believe it's the passion that moves us forward. Obviously, we need the technical pieces and learning is critical. But in my case, it was simply that I knew what I was out to do. We had 3 simple strategic initiatives: build a global brand, as I mentioned earlier, be a catalyst for change, and then also do good and be good. So that's where I am, and that's the road I'm on, and global brand. So for those who still want to think I'm playing around a little, pet project here, or just want to put a little bourbon in. And then the other thing I want to add, so about who's drinking this, 30% of the women, actually, that's our target, and there's about that many drinkers out there. But I want you all to know that a little teacup your grandma had did not always have tea. Our older women were drinking bourbon and all that very, very early on. To your point, Daniel, it's just those are perceptions that we just don't. But oftentimes when we don't see ourselves in places, even in corporate America, we tend to shy away from that. But those are opportunities for us to say, and I think those are opportunities for us to say, why not me?
Yeah. And I would just add that, and I'd love to hear, Dave, like you encountered that with like bourbon specifically. So with mezcal, it's really interesting because mezcal is a spirit that's really like rooted in like Mexican heritage and identity. And a lot of the gatekeepers, and by gatekeepers, I'm talking about beverage directors, bartenders, right? When you're selling to on-premise to bars and restaurants, typically do not look like deer meat, right? Like they don't, and so they have an idea or a perception of what a Mexican product should look like. And if you go to our website and you look at our branding, like we are very specific to Michoacan. For us, it was really important that like from the mezcal to the product, the design, everything was really rooted from this one region that our family is from. And we don't fit the mold or the box of like what people think a Mexican product looks like. So we got actually a lot of pushback. And I remember early on, like thinking like, oh, are we going to be able to sell? Like if these are the gatekeepers and they're not responding well to this. And you're absolutely right. Like I remember like thinking like this, you have to remember like why it is that you started this. And we just decided like we were just going to push through, and ultimately we focused on the customer and on our Mosel community, and they eventually were the ones that started asking for Mosel and helped us get over the gatekeepers. So I'll say that we're still battling that, like it's not over. Like even as last month I was in New York as we just got distribution and was meeting, like that was something very like it's something it's still very recent, like that we're still encountering.
What I'm going to add, Daniel, for the audience is something that will carry you in any business that you have, but there are riches in the niches, just so you know. So, right. And, if I even think about my airport space, but find that area where you can lend your voice. And she's in a very specific niche. But I think that area and being able to focus on it and then bring the stories to it will allow her to grow. But I like to think about that. And even as I've been strategic in building our company, and many times I use that sort of, remind me, what am I here to do?
Yeah, I think it's a great perspective. Again, like having this coming into this industry as an entrepreneur, there's so much to overcome for anyone, but especially coming from your perspective. I think, is there a way in which, thinking about the audience, like you found actually because of the niches that you were targeting, that your gender actually gave you maybe in some ways a competitive advantage? Because alcohol can be so diverse in terms of product availability.
I think for me, as I mentioned earlier, that's because people might underestimate you because you're a woman, right? Then just go do you and navigate. And one of the lessons that my mom taught me and is one that no one ever said it would be easy. And so, use all the assets you have. I mean, being a woman is a wonderful thing. It's how our minds work. That's why we think about diversity of thought, what we bring to the table. And when you lead with your strengths and those abilities that are just simply God-given, but remember, those are advantages. You have, things that other people don't have. And so instead of thinking about what you don't have, think about all the things that you do and leverage that would be really the advice. And as you know, I wrote a book, Courage by Design, but a lot of this is about being courageous, and not listening to the naysayers. And I know Rosaline and will both, and many of you, because you're either in MBA programs and all, we recognize that people will always tell us what can't happen. And I can tell you story after story of people saying, why are you doing this, or you shouldn't. But the real lesson here is that most people are telling you what they can't do. And I don't want people listening to that versus knowing what they can do. And I've had to push through that. And that is what courage is. Fear is going to be there. We could lose everything. The other thing about this business is high barriers to entry. This is a costly endeavor. But when you, again, know that you have a great product, great name, whatever those things are, you'll find the money. And many ventures, particularly early in my path, I didn't have the money starting out. But one thing I know, if it's a good idea, you'll find the money.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think also too, as far as a competitive advantage, is just that I truly believe that women, we tend to operate from a place of abundance and not scarcity. And when you come from that place, so many incredible ideas come. Just thinking about, again, with Mosel, right? Like, as Dee mentioned, right? It's like there's a lot of barriers to enter. You compete with very, like, really large brands. And here we are with our, and a lot of brands are pouring into mezcal brands. And here we come with, we're one of 3 brands from Michoacan. And for us, our thing is like a great product. The mezcal is really great, but also too, like, it's about connection, like connection to this history and connection to the people around you. And the way that we've been able to get into accounts, it just blows my mind. And part of it is because of the community that we've built, but also being, again, operating place of abundance, of collaborating with up and coming chefs, and just trying to figure ways around, when you can't find, a door, find the back door and try to get in. And that to us, specifically Mosel, has got us where we are today.
You said something too that is important there, and the importance of strategic relationships. So I don't want to walk away from that. Particularly as those who are thinking about being entrepreneurs. So I just left this Wealth Summit in New Orleans, and the fact that people tend to want to just do it on their own, and they're concerned, whether they bring in partners. And starting out, I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And but then you start realizing that, and I realized that at some point I sort of hit my plateau. And if I really wanted to scale this company, that I had to think about those strategic partners. And even in the spirit space, which is interesting, we've actually had someone who thought about early on wanting to be my partner at 50%. And the funny story for the audience is that they sent me a deal, and it was an email, and we've been negotiating it. And then I looked at it, and this is the other thing about being, discounted or underestimated, is that I looked at it, I'm like, they got to be kidding. And then end of the day, they called me up and said, did you get my email? And I said, yes, I did, but I didn't think it was worthy of a response. I mean, and the reality is, you think, well, is it because I'm a woman or all that? It's actually business to them. And if they thought that I would be willing to take a deal like that, they would have signed it. So this is why it's important to make sure you got great counsel, follow your instinct and all of those things. But I could have gotten upset, but at that moment, they also revealed their values to me. And in that moment, I also knew there was no way that I would do business with them. Today, we talk about this industry. We're actually, the people and connections at Diageo have been amazing. We can actually ship to 40 states before we even gone to retail. We will be working with, some of the big distributors, but they understand that those strategic partnerships, and right now we're actually contemplating an investment from a division of Diageo into Good Trouble. So a lot of upside, taking advantage of, all the things that we have out there, but the importance of strategic relationships, not shying away from them, but understand if they're good matches, if there's a value alignment, and you have a similar vision, those are good things to consider as we think about growing our companies.
Yeah, it's so interesting, Dee, because I think what most people outside the industry don't realize is alcohol is such a push and pull business, because you can market to consumers like any CPG, but you also have to get distribution. And this is where this idea of strategic partners comes in. You have to break into the wholesalers, and some wholesalers are exclusive and non-exclusive, and each state has different regulations. And so I think, again, your point around strategic partnerships on the business side are, especially in this industry, so critical, because then you can market, you can go viral, but you won't be on shelves.
That's right.
But shifting to that other side around the pull from consumers, do you think your backgrounds and perspectives, both as entrepreneurs but also as women, have given you a different perspective or a different approach on how to build community with consumers, as Rosalinda has talked about, how to market towards a more diverse set of consumers and understanding what segments are growing or not? I'd love to hear, especially for the panel, the audience, who are probably all consumers who are the receivers of this marketing. Do you feel like you have a different perspective on it or a different approach?
Well, I think one of the things is that especially consumers now really care about where their products come from and want to feel connected to them. And as long as you are being, transparent and showing what you're doing and the product that you're delivering, customers show up for you. And that's one thing that Amosel we've been really proud of. And also too, and especially with mezcal, like the way that we approached it, because there's still a lot of education that has to happen. I think with like other spirits categories where people already have an idea, even like with tequila, right, or whiskey or wine, like people already kind of can. They already know what it is. With mezcal, is still like a steep learning curve, and so we've been focused a lot on education and for the whole mezcal category, and I think most brands have been doing that as well to like uplift all, sort of the tide lifts of all boats.
Only thing I'll add to that about, first of all, education is so key. And obviously I've been in the CPG for a little bit and, served on the board of a CPG company. And, it's interesting when you are the CEO leading a charge like that. And then, because our businesses, I would say, are similar, they're so also uniquely different. And then learning the importance of that balancing act between engaging the consumer, but to your point, Daniel, understanding that in this three-tiered system, we just have many different strategic partners. I mean, there are just layers of it. But to her point, authenticity and story matter. And what's happening in the bourbon space, and for all of those who don't like bourbon, I think that the reason that you might not is because you probably didn't get something really good, or we didn't know how to learn how to taste it and savor it. And then you just turn off, like many things, right? I didn't, I never smoked. One cigarette was enough, and like, oh my gosh, I didn't like it. And then you swear off of it. And I'm glad I did that, by the way. And most people who smoke, I said, didn't most people who started ever liked it in the first place, right? But they pushed through it. But I don't want anyone pushing through, the things that we sell. I mean, I knew how important what was in the bottle was important. Now, back to your point about, women versus men. So I think some reason why there's a lot of interest in our product is because we cared so much about what we were putting in. And someone said to me, I mean, you guys just hit it out of the park, because honestly, there's so many people, because the industry is growing. This will be in 2025, this will be a $16.8 billion category. And so when you think about that, and everybody's running to sort of cash in, and what he said to me was, look, everyone's just putting this, average stuff in the bottle, and they're just putting a label on there, and they're trying to sell. And if they can engage the consumer, which again, if you're successful at that, but you're going to have some bad product, and then that doesn't help the industry. One of our intentions is also to help grow the category by education, by making sure people know how to drink this beautiful liquid. And then, we're also a cocktail culture. And I think I said I would send some recipes out, but when you start really understanding the beauty of bourbon, and the secret, by the way, to a really good bourbon cocktail is the higher quality or higher proof. If you try to make a similar one and you wonder why it didn't taste that way at home while at the restaurant, it's probably because of the quality of the bourbon that was being used. But that education and that our ability to actually grow this amazing category and include more women really is a function of just being able to understand the product itself, like everything else. I mean, we love our wines. I do too. We love our mezcals. We love our tequilas and all of that. But, the diversity of, taste, it's like we like different restaurants. I hope that you'll support all of us, right? Mm-hmm. And drink. But I actually love how we can evolve things, and then the role that all of us can play. And anybody can help me with social media stuff. I've had to really engage, because my head is up in airports. And so that part has become so important. And so that's our steep learning curve. It's like, I really need to figure out how to make sure we talk about our brand in a way and use all the vehicles out there to help us sell.
It's funny, I'm seeing the Q&A, and it's mirroring the other questions I had. So I'm going to switch to the Q&A early.
Sure.
So because these are all very good questions coming in from the group. So there's a theme though, which is around building like a team of support, or team of supporters, both in the industry and also outside. So maybe just try to summarize, how did you build a group of people that did support you? Again, could it be outside the industry or in such a complex industry that this is? How did you approach building that group of supporters? People to even help you tactically, but even people just to keep encouraging you to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
You want to start, or?
Sure. So to me, I feel like there's the way I think about it is sort of before you make the jump into entrepreneurship, right? Sort of this the things you gotta have, and then after you make the jump into entrepreneurship. So before and the underlying theme is that support group is extremely important. Making the jump into entrepreneurship, obviously, like having your financials, making sure that you're able to make that jump, but also too having those conversations with your family and friends. Specifically, in my experience, being when you're a children of immigrants, you feel this really deep sense of gratitude and responsibility for your parents because of all the sacrifices that they gave up so that you could have an education and have a good career. And so here, at least for me, like I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like I have a successful tech job and now I'm thinking about giving that up to go back to the land and like sell mezcal. And it's like you mentioned, there's like so many barriers to entry and like it's such a tough business. And I remember feeling really guilty about it. And there was a lot of like work that had to happen before. I almost think about like updating your operating system, the way that you think about things and your role in the family. Especially for me, I'm the oldest of 5. And so I always felt not that my parents like asked for me to support them, but I wanted to, because again, they had given up so much for me. So that was like a big thing, the conversations that I had to have with my family. And they were so supportive. And then my husband, and then my sister, and just like figuring out who, if it was going to be me or her that was going to make the jump. And then also while you're making the jump and after you make the jump, to me, I feel like the group of support that you need has to be both from the industry and outside of the industry. And I would just say that just ask. So even from the very beginning, when we were thinking about doing the mezcal, and I would also recommend that you spend a lot of time on thinking like why it is that you're doing this, because as you're reaching out to people, they're gonna say this is awful, this is a horrible idea. Like even like 5-6 years ago, right, mezcal was not really hot. Like it was still like fairly new, like except unless you were like really in the industry, but people outside were like, what is that? And even today, but you're going to get people thinking you're crazy for doing what it is that you're trying to do. So you got to make sure that you know what you're doing, that you know why it is that you're doing and why you're inspired for it. Because if it was easy, anybody else would do it, right? So
I want to talk on 2 key subjects here. One is mindset, and how critical. I always say the best asset you have is your mind and how we think. And the reality is, and that is why I even wrote the book, is that I recognized that my fears and this mindset was actually in the way. And that limiting thinking and all those things that we all sort of, tussle or wrestle with all the time can either help us or not. And so the question is it serving you? And if it's not serving you, then you have to find a way. And so beyond understanding that our people are some of our best assets, is your mind. Forget about the balance sheet. That asset is right here. And, and about strategic partners, one thing that I talk about is we have to build what I call courage circles. And a circle really is anybody that will inspire you, encourage you, or stretch you. We should feel uncomfortable at times because that means we're learning. And I also say you may have to do a little laundry. And I have, honestly. You cannot allow people who are around you who are saying why, don't see your vision, don't understand that you've done the hard work, you've done the research. I'm very data focused driven. The analytics matter to me, but I follow what's in my heart first, and then I data to support what I do. I knew where the industry was going. I knew that they don't take the time to do that, and yet we still sit there and listen to people who don't know what we know and have the courage and the confidence to just say, this is what I can do, and then proceed. And when you think about partnerships as well, I agree with Rosalinda. It's in and outside of the industry. And you'll know, They're going to be partners that are very different. Some you're going to need financial partners, right? You're going to need lawyers. You're going to need all these different partners, strategic relationships. But then I have who's your foundation, who's your go-to folks who'll just continue to inspire you up. But, but again, seeing also who you can help. See, one thing is important. See, when you walk into those offices to talk about your product, remember that you're bringing something of value to. Oftentimes we think we're asking for a handout or something. Absolutely not. Know your worth, know your value. I know that we have a great product and they would love and should want to be able to want this product in. And I can tell you all the reasons why. And then, by the way, you have all these products. And I do, by the way, I research competition. So I know before I walk in the door who's driving sales, and then I'm going to tell you. So even for instance, our product, our mash bill is 70. And I love this, see if anyone knows the answer to this. Because bourbon is whiskey, but whiskey isn't bourbon. And I'll send you something if somebody can answer that quickly, but we'll see if it comes up. I'll tell you later. But the mash bill for us was very important. We're a high rye. I wanted the smoothness, these beautiful cherry notes, being able to really look at the science, as I mentioned earlier, and then the art of it, and then the combination to create something. I also knew, again, going to master this, 8th generation master distiller, I knew that I needed to be in Kentucky. By the way, you can make bourbon anywhere. It's not like champagne, but the folks from Kentucky will tell you that is where it is, but they do make some of the best because of the corn. And I've just given a little hint of the difference between whiskey and corn and whiskey and bourbon is because of the corn content percentage. But the reality is the passion there, finding the right partners, people who understand, who also love the art of it. A lot of people can help you do things, but if they aren't good at doing it for themselves, they're certainly not going to be good at helping you. And so finding the right kind of partners who really can help elevate and also who you could potentially also help at the same time.
There's so much to do. I think so. Sylvie has a good question, which is what was the first, I'll put emphasis, first and most crucial step that you took when you decided to become an entrepreneur in this space? Because there's the science, there's the sourcing, there's the partnerships, there's the investors, there's the brand. Sylvie's looking to make the jump, maybe.
So let me jump in on that one because I love it. So I knew how important the IP was. I own the IP for Good Trouble and Spirits. I also knew that once I started talking about this name that I was going to be at risk. And by the way, we actually have a few cease and desist letters that are actually going out. So I knew, so when I went into the distiller, they were like, you mean you already have this done? And first of all, they were shocked that, because most start and they don't really know that that they need it, or they work with the distiller and they go and get it later. My idea once we had it was back, and I saw, don't skip on lawyers when starting a business, which is so true. I made the investment to secure that and own it. And it's interesting too, even how we organized the company. I actually structured the company as an operating company, but I have a separate entity that actually holds the IP. And because we think of Good Trouble not only just as a bourbon, but as a lifestyle, and that's what we're building and promoting. But but being able to do that out the gate is own that, protecting trademarks, all of that, intellectual properties are critical. That's just not some battle you want to be fighting at any point, because that's very costly. And it's easy to lose an idea like that when others have, deep pockets, to sort of fight off. So that was what, for me, was out the gate. And I actually did that even with one of my early companies. I knew the importance of paying for that trademark information. It's, as an entrepreneur with little money, you're like, oh, I can wait. That is not anything you want to ever risk.
100% IP for sure. Like, don't skip. I think, I'll look at a YouTube videos and I'll do it myself. No, don't. Hire a really good lawyer. That's like where we spent our money, that specialized in trademark and we did that. And then the other thing is, which I alluded to it, is like knowing like why it is, like knowing your why. That is something, especially and Dee, I'm curious because you're like farther along in the journey, right? But for us being early in the journey, so I mentioned it a little bit, but so I was in tech and I quit my job at the end of 2019 to go full into mezcal. And then 2020 happened. And everything that could go wrong went wrong.
It
Like
does, by
who
the
knew
way.
that yeah, who knew that a shortage of cardboard could impact our business? And it did. And I remember thinking like, what did I do? Right. And that's where knowing like why it is that you're doing this and why you're passionate about it. And obviously we were able to like overcome the global supply chain issues and the pandemic, and we were finally able to launch, and we did our release last year and we sold out, and we just released our second batch this year. But like knowing your why, like that, I just, when I think back about it, 'cause it's so recent, I just think like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I knew exactly why it was that we were doing this, because it really got us through those tough times.
Well, by the way, I'm here to help in any way, so let's make sure we connect. But there's a few things that we did. I'm sure a lot of things we did wrong, and but I also believe that that's also where we learn. So
Yep.
Nelson Mandela says, I don't fail. I either win or I learn. And that's the other thing I would share with everyone is that you're going to stumble. This is particularly if you're new to anything. But you got to take those learnings, those obstacles or whatever they might be, and just leverage them. And I don't want you repeating the same mistakes, of course, but I think you look and recognize that was, she learned about supply chain. I had to do the same. We didn't even think about supply chain in the way that we look at it today. And I mean, that's beautiful stuff, because now I know how to manage it, and I know how to, it really is about risk management. And even decisions I make today, and to make sure that I have product, particularly raw materials, to meet demand, I manage very differently than I would have had, previously. So, we look at those things and recognize that there's just some nuggets of learning there that is only going to make us stronger and help us grow our businesses.
And thinking more broadly about the industry, I'm sure you both are clued into trends, but I always think with trends is some of it's organic, some of it's made. Like you can make your own destiny a little bit in this industry, or especially in your subcategory. What would you like to see in the future for this industry as a whole, or for your segment?
Well, first of all, I want
10 years.
Rosalinda to let me know and how she sold out so quickly, because I'm trying to sell out as well. We actually have a big Black Friday sale coming on, but here's what I would say. We all should just look at obstacles or look at things that are happening that are disruptive around us, and do we want to be part of the solution, or do we just want to be a part of the talk? And when we look at this industry in particular, you can either come in as an entrepreneur. I used to think that I didn't want to be a part of an organization that didn't have many women and full of color, within the management ranks. And nobody really wants to go do that on their own. The day is very different. And now those are opportunities. And it's much like, I'm a trustee for PGA Foundation, and really encourage kids to play golf and all of that. But if you look at it this way, you can go and run with the herd, or you can go another path and then be a star and create opportunities. So where it's sitting within an organization like Diageo or anyone else, or joining entrepreneurial ventures like ours, because we're always looking for people. But I think that there are many ways to go pursue a dream. And it doesn't mean that you got to jump out like I did, without a parachute. But at the same time that you can go in and learn things, even as when I started on my venture, I actually just love cooked. And so, I thought I wanted to be a chef. And it was a night at Charlie Trotter's when I left out and said, I think I'd rather own restaurants. That's a true story. But the reality is that I was out there trying, and I was literally cooking around kitchens in Chicago. Chefs will allow you to come into a kitchen, believe it or not. But she says something important you have to ask. We sit there and ask, what's the worst case scenario? they're going to say no, but there's a chance that they may say yes. So I always say, take the chance. And as you think about where you want to be, and also the intentionality is so important. And this is about even wealth. That's a whole nother conversation we can have, is how we make sure we leave legacies, and how we as women and people of color or anyone, and no matter where you are today, there's still a better tomorrow, and there's opportunities for you to improve your condition. And so for me, it's also figuring out a way to build wealth. We're talking about illuminating the path in this brand. How do we shine our light? Because I fundamentally believe there's good in all of us. And that good, if we choose to use it and bring it forward, it's going to help us. And I think we can do it through spirited conversations. And that's getting around the table. When we break bread, when we drink, we are more alike than different. And that's really the premise of this brand, is how do we go out there, and then how do we blaze new trails? So it's okay to be a trailblazer or a troublemaker of the gut kind, and go out there and just go do you, and unapologetically you.
Rosalinda, any
No, I love everything that Dee said.
yeah.
I agree.
I think there's been so much advice given. I think but any other, again, I think we have an interesting group of people based on the poll, of people who are just interested in learning, but also maybe folks that are ready to take a step into this space, whether it's as an entrepreneur or, entering the space via a Diageo or a corporation playing in this space. What any other advice, in addition to what we've already given, any other advice for these people looking to make that next step, based on learnings, as you said, there's no failure, there's just learning based on the learnings that you've had?
Here's one quick one. There's a woman we were just talking about supply chain. Don't forget that you can be the vendor. And she has, in less than 5 years, she's a $40 million company. And she actually works with Diageo and some of their brands, and manages some of the supply chain pieces. But, within the industry, I think there's many places that you can play. So don't just think because you're not going to manufacture like we are, that if you like the space, that there aren't other ways to enter and tap into the things you love. Because the reality is, if she and I did not like bourbon and mezcal, right? The reality is, I don't know that we would be doing or having some of the success that we have. And if I didn't like it, then when things do get really hard, it'd be easy to just say, I'll pass. But last thing I will add, Rosalinda, is that she talked about it earlier. Everything takes longer than you ever imagine. And there are going to be curveballs that come into play. And that is not something to discourage you. It just gives you another way to reprogram your thinking and how you might be strategic and how you're planning to approach it. But there's just layers on layers of opportunity in any industry, not just spirits, but find where you think you can fit, soar with your own strengths. That is where I think, you're going to find opportunity. And remember, if you don't know, we don't have everything. She and I don't know everything about this business, but there are people out there who can help you. And then being resourceful enough to find people instead of hitting a wall and saying, I give up. Find the way to get around it. Find the people who are open. How you ask, I will tell you, some of the leading executives in the space, I simply, hey, I would love your advice. Think about that. Everybody wants to talk about their business, or I want to learn more. Ask for the advice. Don't be hesitant. And you all, I'm sure this call probably can offer me some advice, and I'm open to it, by the way. But we do have to support each other. I think understanding that we have to empower each other, women supporting other women in business. All of us have an opportunity to elevate each other. And that's what's so beautiful, is that we all have the power to influence lives.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Dee said. Uh, you know, I didn't. So one of the things that you'll notice if you do decide to go into the booze business is that a lot of folks do tend to come from the industry, right? So like when you're working with distributors, they were like bartenders or like, so they were already in the industry. I did not come from the industry. I just drank mezcal. That was like my connection to the industry. We were farm workers, we grew things, but and I remember early on, like being intimidated and being like, oh, like I don't know the lingo and like the way that they talk about things and so forth. But asking, as Dee said, for advice, I always structured them as informational interviews, like just for my like MBA days. I was just like, oh, would you like to can I do an informational interview? I have this idea and I'd love to get your thoughts on how distribution works and so forth. And one of the things that you'll uncover in doing those informational interviews is that you'll start to build your support group from that. I distinctly remember like early on, like when we were thinking about doing this, and I remember I reached out, a friend of mine had a friend who worked for a distributor. And so we're meeting with them. And then another person, she was at a conference and she had this wine. And I reached out to her in Oregon. And those were the first two people that I started with. And the winemaker, like I'm still really good friends with her. And now that we've expanded into Oregon, like she's continued to help me get into, helped me with connections down there. And as you do those informational interviews, what you'll discover, at least in my experience, was you had people who were like, condescending or like, because you're all intimidated, especially early on. You're like, oh, they're like, oh, you should know this, right? If you're trying to start a business. But then I'll never forget Meg, the winemaker.
They're just trying to discourage you, by the way. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I remember Meg, like she treated me like I was an expert. Like she's a winemaker, she's not into mezcal, and I knew about mezcal. Like I knew at least not so much about the whole mezcal industry, but I knew specific to what I was trying to do. Like you're an expert in that area, and nobody can take that away from you. And the way she was with me, I remember being extremely grateful. And now when people reach out to me about starting a business, like I just like pay it forward and think about how Meg treated me in that instance. So don't be discouraged and definitely reach out to people.
I have to add one thing because I know we're coming to a close, but we have to talk about raising capital just quickly. And the only thing I will add is, know who you're going to for money. And what I mean by that is, and I've had to advise entrepreneurs on this way too many times. They go to someone for money and they don't get it, or they're like, if they haven't had a propensity to lend money to somebody else, you're not going to be the first. So just avoid that. Just don't waste, 80-20 rule, 80-20 rule, right? I mean, do your homework. If they have not invested in startups, VC, any of that, they are not likely a candidate for you. And you can waste so much time trying to do that with people who will never give you the money, and you get discouraged. But then there are other people who are investors and who get your industry or whatever. Find them first, right? And that's and then find more of those people. But I don't want you getting discouraged because you got a really good idea and no one's giving you money. You just might be asking the wrong people.
Amazing. I think this is an incredible discussion. I'm sure we can keep going. And as Dee said to me yesterday, it's too bad it's what is it, 1 o'clock here? If it was 5 o'clock, we would have had drinks in our hand, but that's okay.
That's right.
Amy, for next time, the alcohol panel needs to be at like 5 p.m.
I hear
it's 10 a.m. where I'm at, so
I feel like I'm doing a little virtual cocktail party and sharing recipes and all of that, right?
Well, I have to tell you, I cheated and I already went to the recipes that you shared with everybody.
So the one that I love them all. We work with a celebrity mixologist to create those recipes, but the one that I love is Disagree to Agree. It is over the top. It's refreshing. It'll be a great holiday one, but it is so good. It is my go-to drink at home. But oh man, you'll love it. And I can imagine. I'm going to try a little bit with a splash of mezcal and see if I can add a little smokiness to some of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just telling Rosalinda, I just recently discovered mezcal, so I'm really excited. But this was amazing. I cannot think of a better panel to kind of kick off our holiday spirit, if you will. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise. And Daniel, thank you for moderating. Enjoy your day, everyone.